Hello again, welcome to yet another sailboat build video. I'm a little bit on a vacation here in the north. Quite nice weather today. And in this video I think we're starting to make the frame number 0, which is pretty different from the others. Let's jump on the computer and check out a little bit how that actually works. Here we have the 3D model, and the frame number 0 is this one right here in the front. Let's separate that from the rest of the model. You can see this frame is pretty different from the others because it is kind of a ring frame, and I actually did the design for this frame before I had done any of those frames. So I really didn't know much of how that lamination process goes. All of these parts have already been cut actually. So here I have the cut files. All these pieces are already done. They are ready to go, the molds and stuff. But first of all, this radius here in the bottom is pretty tight. This is much tighter than any of those frames before. So I probably need to do much thinner slats for this frame, and also there is just no way to make this as one go. So I have already planned to make a cut in here, so I actually cut these pieces that I have already done with the CNC. I'm gonna cut it in half from right about in here. So there's going to be a first part, kind of the whole frame like the previous ones, like this, and then I'm gonna do this upper part separately and glue them afterwards together as one piece. It's gonna be tight, it's gonna be quite hard probably, but we will see how it actually goes. And here the frame is with the rest of the stuff. So the bulkhead, the watertight bulkhead, will be with the next frame, so this is kind of just between there in the bow locker. Before we jump in the making this, there is some footage from many weeks ago, and in last video I did the frame number 5, and after that we did already the frame number 4. There's some footage of that, and after that vacation, snowboarding vacation, I got massive cramp in my back, so I have not really been able to do much of anything for 2 weeks now. That's why this video is a bit delayed. But let's check that previous footage first and then jump back into this frame number 0. This footage is pretty old, but I just wanted to show you the process of choosing the timber for these frames. This is actually spruce. There was no pine available in this particular hardware store. But the main thing here, of course, is to choose the most straight ones of these. For example, this one is bad. And to choose the ones that have not that many bad knots on them. This is construction timber, so there is always knots, but when going through the pile, you can pretty much get the pieces you want. These are pretty long, so I cut them in half just to fit them on my trailer. Then it was time to get the frame number 5 off the table. This is the frame you saw me laminating in the end of the previous one. It is quite a lot smaller than the previous frames, but the shape is quite awkward here as well. It's more narrow, but still pretty tall, so yeah, a little bit hard to handle. And I just cut these molds off to make it a little bit lighter overall. And right after I started to prepare the frame number 4, the next frame, and this was pretty much the same job as previously. I just needed some additional slats for it, and it was pretty good idea to get the table saw outside so all that fine dust wouldn't go all over the stuff inside the tent. Otherwise, the process of making this was exactly the same as before, just to get those molds in, protect them with the packing tape, getting those rods connected. And in this case, I actually got some volunteering help from Kimmo. Thank you so much. It took almost 3 hours off the working time, the lamination time, and especially that phase when we roll up that epoxy on those slats was considerably quicker. It's still a big job though. A couple of days later, the epoxy was cured and everything looked great, and I went to that small vacation to do some snowboarding. And as mentioned, my back got a really bad cramp after that vacation, so there was a bit of delay in this. But eventually, after a couple of weeks, I got the frame number 4 out from the table, and it was a success. And before I started to make the next things, it was necessary to get rid of all the trash and debris that have accumulated on the shed. There was many piles of garbage and also these shavings from the planer and CNC and all that stuff. And of course quite a bunch of extra wood material that wasn't really usable anymore. And finally, it was time to start figuring out the frame number 0, which is kind of the topic of this video, or should be. You can probably see that my back is pretty bad shape here, so I was taking it quite easy. The first job here was to think about how I really am making this. So here I am cutting off those upper sections to get rid of that ring frame shape, and it took some thinking, and actually now that I have already laminated it when recording this, it didn't go that well, but we'll get back into that later. But after cutting these, the frame is pretty much the same shape than the previous ones. The important thing here was really to get those cuts in exactly the same positions. So I used these rods and the table holes to align the pieces perfectly before cutting anything. All right, here I have the frame number 0, almost ready to go. I have now cut these top pieces off from there, so now this thing behaves more like a regular frame, and this top piece is going to be laminated separately. We get back into that someday. As you can see, this is quite narrow. This radius is quite tight, so that is the next challenge here, really. Here I have some of the slats from the previous lamination. These are 6.5 millimeters, so they are pretty thick, and I barely can bend them here at all. So the slats need to be considerably thinner in this case, and that's all right. I can make at least 3 millimeter slats with that planer. And yeah, there has been many suggestions in the comments, thanks for those, that I should use steam bending with these slats. With the bigger frames, that's not necessary. They go completely fine there. It's not an issue at all. But in this case, there might be need for do something a bit differently. And as for steam bending, I don't have any equipment here, and I wouldn't really like to get any. But with the test frame number 2, I think. There's a link up there. I did took the pieces to the shower, and I wetted them out with hot water, and that really helped to bend them without breaking them. So that might be an option here, to get just a kettle here, some water in the canister or something like that to bend them initially here before the lamination, and then I can put the heated box and dry them up afterwards. So that is one option, of course, but we'll see. I first now going to make much thinner slats for this one, and we'll go from there. But now tonight I just put plastic sheet and make everything ready here to get a little bit forward. It now has been almost 4 weeks since we did the last frame. My back has been a really bad shape. Now it's much better, not completely fine yet, but I can do things at least for a few hours here. So hopefully with some exercise and stretching and stuff, it will get better. But now I'll do this, and we'll see you just in a moment with the thinner slats. All right, here I have some slats ready to go. They are 3 millimeters thick, so they are about half the thickness of the stuff I used before, and they actually bend quite nicely, as you can see. So I have now several piles in here. This biggest one is the normal stuff. Then there is a smaller pile of a little bit better, without that many knots on them. Then there is this quite small pile of excellent stuff that has almost no knots on them. So these should be the best stuff to bend into the tightest curve, I believe. And then there is this pile of a little bit questionable pieces. I did these with the planer, and it goes quite well. I have some problems with the rollers of the planer. The second roller doesn't work that well. There's some problem with the gearing there. We should take a look at that at some point. But anyway, when it works very well, and it's not a problem to do this thin stuff with that. Although if there is a bigger knot or something, it tends to tear off like this. And yeah, that's why there is this questionable pile. But now I think I'll try to bend this stuff on that mold and see what happens. This frame number 0 is actually the first one I did of these molds and this plan. And now when I think about it, I would do it a bit differently. First of all, I would put a mold piece right here in the center. Now there is no mold in here. It can be a bit of a problem, but I think these slats will bend just nicely over this curve. So let's start very carefully with this semi-okay stuff. The problem really is when bending individual slat like this is that when it splits, it will split on the outer edge, like tearing it up like this, because the grain is not, of course, completely straight. It goes a little bit like that here and there. So if I bend it like this and there is a grain going over to the edge to another, it tends to split from the outer edge. And now when I have some experience with this, it helps that I have actually pile of them together. It actually prevents the inner piece from splitting. So this is pretty risky actually to bend these one by one. I really should have several in a pile here. Now I can hear some cracking already. These crack pretty suddenly. They don't warn that much. But as you can see, this thin piece actually bends quite well. I have not that much force in here yet. So now it's on its place. And actually this curve right here looks pretty good. The other problem is that of course these are not long enough. I need to make the joints on them, but luckily the joints will be on that upper section and that should be all right. This one has a couple of knots on this end here, but on this end there is only these smaller, so these are not that prone to cracking. So I will move it on that end and bend it from here. All right. I think it will work. Now I just need to measure how long the slats need to be and make the joints. Like so. Yeah, that will work, definitely. I can make this happen without using any water. That's a really good thing because, well, it's now -2 degrees here and using water in these temperatures, it's a bit annoying, at least. All right. Measuring the pile of these slats was just the same job as previously, although in this case there is just so many of those. All right, now the slats are bent That was much harder than I thought. I think most of this boat build will be harder than I think. But yeah, they are in, and yeah, I was thinking while I was doing this that this is going to be a huge mess with all the epoxy around. But nevertheless, I would really love to do this first frame continuously around this bottom. One option that came in mind was to just make these frames as separate pieces and make a filler piece right here on the bottom, so that frames would actually stop here and wouldn't go continuously around here. Plans or the design really doesn't say that they should even go, but I would like to do it that way. Anyway, I think I'm gonna leave this now here just to settle in a little bit. The next thing I need to do is to cut the joints with the CNC. I don't have the CNC computer with me today, and I'm feeling a little bit not that well either, so I'm just gonna leave it and go spend a nice Sunday evening at home. But yeah, these are now here ready to go almost, so we'll see how it actually goes after all. It's now a week later, and I was right. I was getting good old flu, and I haven't been really able to do anything during this week. But yesterday it was a little better, and today I got and grabbed this pile of wood. We're gonna mill this tomorrow with Kimmo, that same guy you saw in the earlier footage. This is pile of wood for the next 4 frames. These are actually the last frames that are the thin frames like those. So all the rest of the frames will be a little bit thicker, but we'll get back into those later. And I think I'll end this video right here just because it has been a weeks and weeks delay already, and I just want to make this online soon. So feel free to leave a comment down below. Remember, of course, to subscribe. This project is now really trying to kick off as quickly as possible. I made a whole bunch of schedules already. You can check the Trello link down below in the description. There's somewhere a link to a Trello table. You can see kind of stuff happening soon, and I have some dates there as well, so you can keep track of the project in real time there. We'll continue in the next video with that frame 0. I'm gonna laminate that next week, and actually I'm gonna laminate the next frame number 6 from this stuff next Sunday as well. So fingers crossed I'm well enough to do those things, and yeah, we'll see you later. And thank you for my patrons. Bye bye.